Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. We're in the full swing, Sean, of 2023. We've already had a major regional championship, but I gotta ask, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Jake. Had a nice chill weekend. I will, for all of the very limited football fans who also listen to this podcast, though, my Cowboys were absolute garbage on
Have
Sunday.
they made the playoffs already?
They're already in the playoffs. Yeah, the game
so
didn't
they don't
really
need
matter.
to play well.
It didn't matter, but Jake, it does not look good when your team plays that poorly right before their first playoff game. You're like, oh no. So we'll see.
Get out all the bad now. But who do you have? I know this podcast releases after the national championship, but who do you have in the college national championship?
Let me just go look up who's playing in the.
I'm pretty sure it's TCU and Georgia.
TCU and Georgia.
Yeah, pretty sure.
TCU is in a college football national championship.
They've been all right.
Hold on, NCAA championship.
Georgia versus TCU. It plays in like 15 minutes at the time of this recording.
Diggity. You know, I'm gonna pick TCU. I'm from Texas, and like I know TCU. Yeah, TCU is one of those teams that like I didn't really care about. To be frank, I was a Longhorns fan. When I was younger, but I'll go with TCU because like I think this has got to be their first ever national championship appearance.
No idea.
They're like not that. They're like good at football, but like not that big. So
well, I mean, they're pretty good at football if they're in the national championship.
Obviously. How about you? Who are you picking?
I'm picking Georgia. Why? I don't really know. They're red, I guess.
Well, I mean, it feels like they're like one of those teams that's like been there before, you know.
I think they have in the last couple of years.
So they're like Georgia and Alabama and Oklahoma. USC.
I don't really follow the sports ball. Okay. I just work in it.
I don't follow it. They just pay me.
Yeah. But what I do follow is the Pokemon trading card game, Sean, and you do too. And we got a lot to talk about today. This San Diego regional, in my opinion, was very exciting. It was very cool. And you may have seen us tweet about it over on the Metapod. I sent the screenshot to Sean. Aerodactyl VMAX kind of dominated the tournament, which is awesome. But Aerodactyl VSTAR dominated in ways that I can't believe it dominated. So we'll talk a bunch about that later in the podcast. But first, as always, Sean, what are we doing?
We got that 5-star review or comment on YouTube.
It's going to be a 5-star review today over from Apple iTunes. Remember, whether we're 5 stars or 1 stars in your opinion, leave us a review, leave us a rating. It helps out the channel a ton, and we really appreciate feedback that you all provide. This feedback is given through Elroy ! 77. This is the first time I've actually seen like an exclamation point in a review name. Yeah, kind of crazy. This podcast is extremely helpful. Great podcast. I love all the deck reviews and have been making some decks with some of the cards in them. Elroy, thank you so much for the review. Glad to talk about a bunch of different decks for you. And hopefully, there's 1 or 2 more that you can build out of this tournament that we got coming up. Or you can build out of these boxes and stuff that we're going to talk about.
It's true.
Some new stuff, Sean.
Speaking of those boxes, that was a good transition that I almost missed.
Let's go.
Speaking of these boxes, we have a new product coming out soon that is called the Knockout Collection, which is going to be featuring the Galar Pokemon. So still like base, like Sword and Shield era, rather than moving directly into the Scarlet and Violet era. And what these are is they are going to be reprints of a few different cards that you can get: Galarian Slowking, Obstagoon, and Dragapult. It's only $10, which is super cheap. Comes with 2 sticker sheets, booster packs, a PTCG live code. A sticker sheet is interesting. Yeah, like they're saying here, it's like the first time that comes with that instead of a coin. Jake, what do you think about $10 for a couple of packs and some promos?
It's I mean, it's fine. Yeah. I mean, it seems like a fair price. You are getting 2 packs, right? In the image on Poke Beach that they use, they have a Silver Tempest pack and an Astral Radiance pack. Pack rates are going up.
Mm-hmm.
As of late, I think we talked about that in a previous podcast episode where the cost per pack goes up to $4.99.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So $10, in my opinion, is pretty much the same thing as buying 2 packs. You do get a set of stickers as well, so that's where the extra money comes in. You get the promos on top of it. So if you like cracking packs, especially like small kids,
Mm-hmm.
it you all never saw, the listeners and the YouTube watchers and stuff like that never saw this. But when I was at home, you know, I lived in a bunk bed, and under the top bed of the bunk, my brother and I would put every single sticker like that we came across. So it's like littered of like probably 12 years worth of stickers.
Oh, interesting.
So I mean, this is a great thing to get like small kids and things like that, and it's cool, you know.
You know what this feels like? They said that this is like these knockout collections are usually sold at Walgreens and the Pokemon Center, so I guess it's not a new product necessarily. I've never
It's
seen
just
it.
like a new iteration.
But
Well, new iteration would be new product. Anyways, go on.
well, yeah, but I mean, I wonder like something like this. It feels kind of like those blister packs that you can get that have like 2 to 3 packs in a promo, and sometimes
Yeah.
they'll have like a pin or something as
Mhm.
well. I mean, it feels like it's just another packaging, quite literally, of that thing. So
Mhm.
pretty straightforward.
And I mean, like, I also don't mind the change from sticker sheet to coin, because I feel like a lot of times the coins you get like the same 3 coins
Yes.
in a lot of these types of boxes that are not specifically like the Eternatus VMAX box or whatever. And they've also done this transition into gigantic coins,
They're
right?
huge.
Yeah, they're huge coins, and they're way bigger than ones that you usually see people play with. And so with this kind of style of packaging where it's just like a long, thin thing, it's probably much easier, I would say, at this point to just use a sticker sheet that you can fold up and things like that and put inside, and they can just be the size of like 2 packs stacked on top of each other. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And you don't have a coin rattling around in the pack either.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's basically it. But another product, what's another couple of products coming out, Jake?
We've talked about these products lately, and we've got an update on them as well. The Clara Cyrus Premium Tournament Collection boxes. They have revealed the product images. We talked recently about the 2 trainers in their upcoming collection boxes, and that they were going to be them and the characters. And so now showing off what is the products of those. We've got the 2 designs of Cyrus and Clara. Both are with 2 Pokemon that they are kind of trademarked with. Clara with a Galarian Slowking and then a Galarian Weezing. Very cool that they're both Galarian Pokemon because she is a Galarian trainer. And then Cyrus having Honchkrow and Gyarados.
Yeah.
So that's pretty. It's interesting that they go 2 Galarian Pokemon with Clara, because on her team I'm pretty sure she had other non-Galarian Pokemon, whereas Cyrus has like a Kanto Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean it is, but I mean I guess that's, I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
I mean, I'm pretty sure the Gyarados was on his team, like in the video game when you'd fight him. But like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I think.
I will say
Gen 4 love.
I do like the dice for Cyrus specifically.
Oh,
It's
because
like
the
that black and yellow.
yeah, I mean, black and yellow, in my opinion, is one of the better color combinations that you can have.
Yeah.
Clara's, for anyone that doesn't know, because she's a poison type trainer, they've done purple and green, which is kind of a cool color. The designs are these. There's something interesting about these, Sean, in my opinion. So, in the past, I have talked and complained about these boxes and how the deck box is too small, right? And we actually got a YouTube comment a couple weeks ago just asking to explain that. And I've said, for anyone who doesn't know, this deck, the old deck box, like in the Juniper box, you could not fit 60 sleeved cards in there. It was too small. It was only 60 unsleeved cards. As a competitive player, you know, I'll be the minority on it, right? Because the competitive player is the vast minority of card collectors. That sucks because the deck box would be really cool if I could fit my deck in it, and I'd probably use it more. But in these Cyrus and Clara boxes, if you're looking at the images on PokeBeach, they almost look like the double deck boxes that you get at Worlds. Not exactly, but they're much wider.
That is what it looks like, but this is where I like wonder about that, because if I look at the product packaging,
Like the product packaging is the same.
So
Yes.
like, how would they? So are they standing the double deck box on its side? Maybe
It would have to be.
right, and so maybe they're doing that, right? Like maybe they did change the deck boxes, but it also, I wouldn't write off the fact that maybe they've used the wrong package for the mock-up. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, I want to say this is well, it says Pokemon Nintendo Creatures Game Freak. I mean, like, I don't know.
It happens.
Would they make a mistake like that?
I mean, it happens. It's possible.
And not like send an update
I mean,
to people?
I mean, look, this is the kind of, all these images, right? These are the kind of images that get sent to typically to stores and distributors, especially. So they could have sent an image to a distributor and then they resend a different image, and a site like PokeBeach may not, like, it doesn't really matter to them if they get a slightly corrected ratio. You know, it's just like, it's going to look something like this. It's close enough.
It would be interesting. I don't have this in front of me, but it would be interesting to see the Marnie and Juniper product images if they were kind of in that sense.
I was trying
because
to
then you could kind of see you could see if like they did that same thing on there. But I mean, the deck box is, I would assume that it's probably going to be the same depth in terms of it's, you know, you'd be able to fit the same amount of cards, right, as the Juniper one or the Marnie one, except you get two sides of that. So theoretically, you could put your whole deck. You just have to slot it in two slots. That's what that kind of looks like to me. Who knows if that'll be? It could be like a sideways opening box, even. I have no idea. We'll never know until
March 24th. That's when we'll know.
Yeah, that's when we'll figure it out. So, anyways, March 24th, as Sean said, that is when that is releasing. They are going to retail at $39.99 each. It comes with the full art foil supporter card featuring Cyrus or Clara. I don't think we know
which Clara. Yeah.
Which Clara it's going to be. We're curious if it's going to be. I mean, she doesn't have an alternate, I don't believe, as of yet. So the theory is that she's going to get an alternate, and then I think it's also still theory that the Boss's Order Cyrus promo, it was leaked a while ago that we were going to get it in English. We just don't know how. This would make sense as we're getting it. So who knows? And who knows if the promos, what the promo holo rares will be of the cards. Will they be like the Juniper ones, the regular ones, or will they be like the Marnies where they have, you know, the design that's on the boxes? I hope the design on the boxes, because Cyrus especially looks freaking sweet.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's really it, Jake, in terms of products. Not a lot of product news beginning of the year. You know, it's a little slow roll into the year, but there was, to kick the year off, a regional.
There was, Sean, in San Diego, 846 players, Sword and Shield through Silver Tempest. There was a day one graphic that was released in terms of the deck usage analysis to kind of give you an idea of this format, Sean. If you had to take a guess, what was the number one played deck?
Most played? I would still pick Lugia as the most played deck.
And you were correct, because Lugia consisted of 33% of the meta. That is huge. I saw a tweet somewhere, and I can't remember who said it, so my sincerest apologies. I believe that Lugia is up there as like one of the most played decks in terms of like two different metas, because we've had now multiple regionals of Lugia, and it's taken such a huge share. Like not even like Buzzwole took that much or something like that. So very, very interesting. Mew VMAX Double Turbo Energy, 11.1% of the decks in this meta. Lost Box, Comfey, like ones with Rayquaza, or well, Comfey with the Rayquaza one specifically was 9.5%. So interesting that this specific variant, had like almost a 10% share, in my opinion. You have Regigigas with 7.8%. Other Lost Zone toolbox. So this is every other Lost Zone variant. So more than likely, you are going to face one with a Rayquaza, amazing rare Rayquaza in it. That's been the hot spice as of late. The other Lost Zone toolbox decks were 5.2%. And Sean, what do you think was 4.1%? Take a guess.
I would probably guess some Arceus variant, maybe. Maybe a Duraludon, Arceus Duraludon.
You would be incorrect. It's Eternatus VMAX.
Oh, that's right. You know, people have been getting hype on Eternatus VMAX again.
I believe I was Jeremy Jallin that was playing Eternatus VMAX Galarian Weezing, and I think Frank Persick was the one that cooked up the deck. Frank Persick, we had him on our podcast, so just a little note there, kind of creating an archetype and bringing back a Eternapile that Sean so desperately hated at one point in the meta. But I will say, Sean, it didn't make top 8, so you can sleep happy tonight.
I mean, look, I think Galarian Weezing is one of those cards that I think, in theory, it's always been like pretty strong, right? Because there's so many abilities that are needed for decks to work. You look at Mew VMAX, obviously you want to use Genesect. You look at Arceus, you want to use the Arceus ability. Starbirth.
Yeah.
You look at Lost Box, and if you can't use Comfey, and especially
can't use Comfey, can't use Greninja,
it's terrible. And then you even look at like Reggie, can't use the Reggie ability.
Can't use whatever that's called, the one with the Gigas.
Lugia, you can't get your Archeops, or even if you do get the Archeops, you can't use them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it makes a lot of sense in theory, but the thing that's always held it back in practice is just that it's a 3-cost retreating Pokemon that doesn't do a ton of damage turn after turn, and it is a stage 1, which like you can think to yourself, okay, well, stage 1's not so bad, but like it's a stage 1 that is easily killed by one hit. So unless you're like building up a bunch of them, and I don't know, it's just your game plan can take a while.
It's interesting because even though I didn't get to watch a ton of games, one of the rounds that I got to watch was Jeremy Jallin. I believe in the final round of day 1 play on stream. And a lot of the concept of this deck, I don't have a deck list in front of me. I could probably actually pull it up as I'm talking. The concept of the deck was really just like to slow down your opponent, because as we were saying, the meta right now is so fast and so ability heavy, and it's very, very, Sean, I'm sending this to you now.
Good. I'll pull it up.
You've got a heavy line of the Weezing, but you don't use Weezing like the whole game. Yes, you kind of just absolutely destroy. You absolutely destroy decks like Lugia and Lost Box that are so reliant on those abilities, but it's the buildup of Eternatus VMAX. That gives you time to build up the Eternatus VMAX, put a bunch of Pokemon on your bench. You also, in the poison, which Sean, you alluded to, not a lot of damage, you do have the Radiant Hisuian, what's that Pokemon? Sneasler?
Oh, okay.
I think it's called. Do you remember what that does?
I don't know what it does. I'm assuming it like doubles poison counters or something like that.
It adds 2 poison damage counters every turn. So
It's good.
there's 6 damage counters every cycle of turn, which the math kind of works out with Lugia because I believe it's 280. Well, actually, that math doesn't necessarily work out,
yeah, I
but
was
you've
about to
got
say.
Goon King, so that makes it reach to 40. I believe if my math is correct. But you've got stuff like Galarian, Zigzagoon, and things like that that can place damage counters. So that's the thing with this deck. Kind of slow your opponent down, force the game to really slow down, and then use Eternatus or Galarian Moltres or Crobat VMAX to just start wiping as you're set up, but your opponent is not. So I mean, it's a very interesting and cool list, and probably one that a lot of people were not prepared for. Very interesting play.
I mean, it's interesting. The one thing I'll also call out here is just the fact that your supporters are 4 Marnie and 3 Judge, largely. And you got a couple of others in there, but the bulk of them is Hand Disruption. You've also got 3 Temple of Sinnoh, so turning off all of those, special energies. So yeah, to your point, it's very like, I'm here to disrupt you and win by making it so that whatever you're trying to do, you can't really do it. So it's interesting.
Another interesting deck that maybe didn't make top 8. You may have seen me and the Metapod podcast talk about it over on social media on Twitter. Aerodactyl VSTAR made an appearance in a deck that I never thought it would be a part of, and that is Mew VMAX, Sean.
Interesting.
Again, with Aerodactyl VSTAR, we talked a little bit about it in previous regionals. I believe Arlington is when we talked about it. The ability to use Ancient Star, whatever the VSTAR power for Aerodactyl VSTAR is, the ability to use that first, especially, if you go first against a matchup like Lugia, if you do that, Lugia just literally cannot win, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just so dominant. I mean, yes, you sacrifice a Fusion Strike Pokemon spot on your bench, but it is just that powerful and that good to be able to do. And especially for something like Regigigas as well, right? Regigigas, had to then manually attach on there. It cannot use Regigigas. And so you can just absolutely dominate, especially because the gusting and things like that in Regigigas decks, there's only like a couple Serena in there, and so you can just buy so much time. Also, Xander Pero, which is the deck that we're showing off today in this part of the video, also opted to play Manaphy in this Mew VMAX list, Sean.
Interesting. I guess that would stop any sort of damage spread to knock out the Aerodactyl, maybe? Or just damage spread in general?
Well, especially with Lost Box, and also, I don't know if Lost Box was actually playing it too much, but like Lugia, playing Raikou, very, very popular. And so therefore you get that Manaphy in there, and people cannot snipe away your Genesect. People can't snipe that Oricorio on the bench to sort of run the prize trade, race in the prize trade. So a lot of this list that you're seeing right here in terms of, the Lost Cities, Path to the Peaks, the Aerodactyl, Manaphy, a lot of that has to do with trying to sway, as Xander puts it, the Regigigas and Lost Zone decks, which, as we mentioned earlier, took up a huge portion of the meta. And so obviously with the Aerodactyl, with taking out Lugias, theoretically, this is not a bad list.
No, it's certainly not. I mean, I think, and we can talk about the list that won. We don't actually have the list that won the whole tournament, but that was played by Gibson Archer Tang. But what we do know of the list is it was a Vikavolt deck, so obviously item lock. But the other key component, I believe, was Aerodactyl VSTAR.
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, Vikavolt has 2 attacks, but the first attack is the one that really matters in terms of controlling the opponent, which is for 2 energy, 1 colorless, 1 lightning, you do 50 damage, and your opponent can't play any item cards from their hand on their turn. And so much of the format is based around items, whether it's Pokemon search, playing, tool cards or power tablets or,
Lost
switching cards,
vacuums.
lost vacuum, right? Like, there's just so much that you just cannot do if
Hmm.
you are under item lock. And so if you combine that with Aerodactyl VSTAR, which, effectively turns off, what is it? Turns off VSTAR.
Abilities.
It's all abilities?
Yeah, it's abilities.
Oh, could you read it out? I'm sorry. I want to hear
Um,
that. Hold on. I can probably find it. I think a different list
your
also had it.
opponent, it gains an ability, right? When you use Ancient Star V-Star power, it gains an ability to where your opponent's Pokemon V in play, except any Aerodactyl V-Star, have no abilities.
Got it. Yeah. So like you turn off all abilities. So you turn off Starbirth, you turn off, I mean, not that it matters, Palkia, you turn off Lugia, you turn off
Mhm.
Genesect,
You turn off a huge portion of the meta.
Yep.
I think earlier I said Regigigas. That was a mistake by me. I think I mentioned turning off Regigigas and Greninja and things like that.
Yes.
I meant that for Galarian Weezing.
Oh. But like, so it's just interesting that Aerodactyl, obviously it's in the first place list. It was in Xander's Mew list. And
Mhm.
it's also in, I believe, the 5th place list, Arceus list. I'm just going to click that right now to double confirm. And yes, it is.
It does. Yes.
So several of these top decks playing Aerodactyl V-Star and other top players playing decks that basically are there to slow the game down, to put more control back into the game. I think that's a really interesting change in the meta from where we were.
It is interesting too, because as we've seen more and more Lugia, Lugia is predictable
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning of the game, right? That's usually when people are using the Aerodactyl V-Star. It's predictable in that turn 1, it wants to get Archeops in the discard pile, and it wants to put Lugia V on the bench. Second turn, it wants to evolve into Lugia V-Star. It wants to use the V-Star power ability to put the Archeops on the bench. And that's literally every single game.
Yep.
Does not matter. Every single game, that is the goal of Lugia V-Star. So this shift in seeing these people try to counter that, you go first, right?
Yeah.
You can, I don't want to say you can guarantee that you can get,
I mean,
this
nothing is
counter off
guaranteed.
to get this counter off an Aerodactyl V-Star, but you've got a really, really good chance to do that. And it's really hard for a deck like Lugia, right, to be able to counter that. I mean, it's not impossible, but it makes it incredibly difficult. And the deck is not necessarily built in that sense, right? To be able to counter that at this point, maybe moving on from now, and after we get Crown Zenith, maybe it does become that way. We don't know. But for now, for this event, people found out that Aerodactyl V-Star was the play.
Yep.
And especially with its super efficient energy cost, just being one colorless energy, with the Mew VMAX, you can stick a double turbo energy on it, right? The damage modifier literally does not matter.
Yep.
Vikavolt, you can use Melanie, you can use a lightning energy, you can use any energy, capture energy as well, to set up the rest of your board. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool. The winning list also had the Mysterious Tail Mew in it.
Nice.
And I didn't get to watch because I was busy with work and stuff. But I would imagine that maybe it played shoes also. I don't know that for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me because, there was a point before Lugia V-Star, if you remember, Sean, that Mew shoes, Mysterious Tail Mew and Trekking Shoes was a viable combination of cards that a lot of people played. It was turbo, right? People were calling it turbo. So especially in a deck that is slower and it forces your opponent to go slower, if you can go faster, that would make sense. And Mysterious Tail Mew gets you the item cards that you really want. Quick Balls, Ultra Balls, things like that, to evolve, into the V-Star, to put a Lumineon V down to grab Melanie or something like that. It insane.
Yeah.
Really, really cool winner. I like this deck a lot. It's cool.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think the point that you made, I'm amazed that this person got first with the deck
Mhm.
because like I didn't get to watch any gameplay either, but it does, I think, I feel like it relies heavily on going first.
Well, even then, I mean, even if you're going second, right? So here's the thing about the combination of Aerodactyl and Item Lock that made this deck so strong. With Vikavolt, we talked about it previously because I think there was a top 8 in Arlington or something like that. We've talked about a list recently of Vikavolt V. Vikavolt V very consistently can get turn 1 Item Lock going second, right? And so your opponent, right, you can't do a ton of things going first. If you're Lugia V-Star, for example, because, you know, you can't use a supporter because turn 1 supporter rule is still not allowed. And so it gives you, you know, still a strong start, even if you're going second. Like, I think the deck probably prefers to go first in something like a Lugia V-Star matchup.
Sure.
But
Who doesn't?
it's not impossible going second, because if you stop them from using items, their only way to be able to get you to discard the Archeops as a Lugia player, the only way that you can discard stuff is by using a supporter, right? Or the Lugia V's first attack, something of the wind or whatever. It's like discard a card from your hand and draw 3 cards or something like that. And plus, Vikavolt's hitting for weakness. So with Vikavolts, you know, we've seen Vikavolt lists in the past because we don't have this winning one yet at the time of this recording. The ones in the past had that Zapdos as well.
That's true.
Inside of it, that boosted damage, so 20 more extra damage onto a Lugia V-Star with the weakness. You've got Choice Band as well.
Yeah.
Very,
That's a
very
good
interesting. And, you know, you had mentioned the main attack being the first one, but especially with Mew VMAX as well being such a dominant deck, right? In Genesect has 190 HP. Your second attack, Super Zap Cannon, Lightning, Colorless, deals exactly 190 HP. So if you need a finishing move real quick, maybe you've jumped ahead in the game a little bit, you know, you can do that knockout with something like the Choice Belt. So Vikavolt just more and more, especially as Lugia is so dominant, more and more Vikavolt is becoming a dominant card as well, just counter card. Quaking Punch is back.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point about. And I forgot about the weakness against Lugia too, because that does speed up the game for you. Where like even if you aren't going to get
you put your opponent on a shorter clock.
Well, yeah, like
you know?
even if they can get the Archeops down, if you're hitting them for weakness every turn, like that's not great for them either. So,
and especially because Lugia as well uses like Archeops, for example, to attack at times. You know, you can just one-hit KO them. You can boss up an Archeops if they, maybe if you didn't get your Aerodactyl V-Star out because, you know, your V-Star's prized or something like that. You know, and they put out the Archeops. You know, bossing KOing an Archeops to limit them to just one Archeops is actually so strong because it makes it, I think it's impossible if you don't have Yveltal. Yeah, the Yveltal Amazing Rare.
Oh, right. Yeah, you can't.
What I'm saying, you can't. If you already weren't having it down and manually attaching to it or accelerating energy onto it, I don't think that they're able, because the energy cost of 5, I think it is.
Yeah.
And a lot of it being colored.
Yeah.
Colored costs. They can't respond with just a Yveltal Destruction of Death or whatever it is, Amazing Destruction knockout to just KO your Pokemon with whatever damage it or whatever health it has. So it's just really, really interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a super neat deck. I've seen a lot of people play it lately because after Arlington, I think like Andrew Mahone spent a whole day playing it. Azul spent a whole day playing it on stream. So it's pretty cool. Interesting deck, Sean.
Well, I will say second place was Mew VMAX. We don't know that list, so No idea if it was a fusion energy or a double turbo version. Who knows?
Or
But
if it had an Aerodactyl VMAX in
right,
it.
yeah, exactly.
I know that Xander Pero, we've talked about Xander Pero being in the group of guys with like Rahul Reddy, Isaiah Bradner, you know, and how they usually play the same deck. I believe Xander was the only one in that friend group that played that. Nobody could convince, I mean, he couldn't convince anybody that this was the gas. And
The
I know
only
he
mad
wasn't in
lad to
top 8,
play
but yeah.
Aerodactyl
I mean,
VSTAR in his
he's
view.
always played like obscure decks in the meta. You know, he played, gosh, what was it? It was the DC Open at Worlds. He played the Chessmate Naganagel
Oh, right.
GX
Oh, my
deck.
gosh.
That
Yeah.
was such an incredible deck. You know, you have him playing Dialga V-Star very, very well when the meta was very much not Dialga V-Star, and playing like obscure ways with it. And now this Mew VMAX deck that we talked about, I mean, it's just incredible deck building. Closed deck lists are my favorite.
Oh, yes. I mean, I guess the next deck we can quickly talk about, I don't think it's going to be that different from what we may have seen before, but Duraludon VMAX getting third with Arceus V-Star. You know, I don't think there's anything in particular with this deck that's changed all that much. But,
using the Arceus V Chorus experiment engine.
Yep, always a good engine. The one thing I
Playing
will
the
say,
mustard.
yeah, there is one Rapid Strike style mustard, which is, you know, because I think with this deck, what you want to do is have one V-Star go down, have one VMAX go down, and then only have one VMAX left.
Yeah.
So you're gonna only have one you know, Pokemon or whatever. Yeah. So the other the one thing I'll mention about this deck though is I would expect to see more of Duraludon VMAX or this style of play after Crown Zenith comes out. The reason being, we talked about it, I think, last week, the Radiant Eternatus that allows you to put up to 2 VMAXs from your deck onto your bench, I believe. And so, like, whatever big stonewalling Pokemon you're going to go grab, I think Duraludon VMAX, the fact that it got third here, I think shows that it's a really good candidate for that. So
it's just really interesting because, like, in my opinion, if you're playing Eternatus, Radiant Eternatus, do you still play Arceus V-Star? Because that kind of like ruined your prize trade.
Exactly. No, I think you're exactly right. I think you play, you know, 1 Radiant Eternatus into 2 Duraludon VMAXs. The question then becomes, how do you accelerate the energy?
You have to, in my opinion, you have to play like Mysterious Tail Mew nets, right? With it, because I mean, because if you think about it, right, like you have to put it onto the bench from your hand. So you have to have another Pokemon in there to buffer, because, you know, if it's just Radiant Eternatus and the Duraludon V, right? You know, you put a Duraludon V down. Do you want to put 2 more VMAXs down on the bench? Like, that just seems like too many Pokemon.
Oh, yeah,
for this
definitely not.
On the bench. So you got to buffer it with like a Mysterious Tail Mew or something like that. Some other support Pokemon.
Yeah.
To be able to more than likely start every single game. And then nets as well, I think, would work too, because if you start that Eternatus VMAX, you can net it up. And then, you know, be able to use the ability.
So yeah, I my personal opinion, the reason I wanted to bring this deck up, I don't think it's that different. I think clearly Duraludon VMAX as a strategy makes sense. You would have to solve for the energy acceleration onto the Duraludon VMAX, but outside of that, I would expect to see more of that in the coming weeks as Crown Zenith becomes legal.
We're excited for Crown Zenith, but we're also excited, Sean, about some of these other lists in here. If you want to look at the Lost Box, we can kind of look at one with the Rayquaza as well.
Yes.
So again, Lost Box, we mentioned the Lost Box Rayquaza taking a vast majority of Lost Box variants. If you do not remember what the amazing rare Rayquaza does, it's 120 HP colorless Pokemon, and its amazing burst attack is a cost of 1 grass energy, 1 lightning energy, and 1 fighting energy. It is 80 times in terms of its damage output. Discard all basic energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 80 damage for each type of basic energy you discarded in this way. This deck, as you would come to expect, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of energy, basic energy specifically. So you can do 80 times 5, that's 400 damage. You can knock out anything in the format, Sean.
Yeah, and look, you don't need to do 4. You could also just do 320 with 4 energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that only requires 2 Mirage Gates. Like, you have 4 Mirage Gates, and you could go from having no Rayquaza to a Rayquaza on the bench, 2 Mirage Gates, all your energy, and dealing enough damage to knock out any of the VMAXs for 3 prizes.
And it doesn't even need 2 Mirage Gates either to knock out like a Lugia V-Star or something of the sort, because, you know, with the 3 energy cost, you can just use the Mirage Gate, and you've got a couple different options. You can Raihan onto it, right? There's a couple Raihan in this list. You're playing a bunch of 1 prize Pokemon that are going to get knocked out every single turn. Or what you could do is you just manually attach, whether that is something from the hand that you picked up, because this deck does draw a lot through flower selecting on the Comfey, and then also Radiant Greninja, or you can Radiant Greninja and then just Training Court that energy. There is 1 Training Court in this list, so plenty of ways to get energies, both from the discard pile and, you know, from the deck, from your hand, from anywhere except your prizes.
I mean, I think what's interesting to this is a nice response to people playing Big Parasol. Because if you remember, Big Parasol stops all effects of opponents' attacks. And that includes the Yveltal effect to just knock you out. And this says, well, for 1 less energy, I can do enough damage to knock you out. Like, I don't need to just get the instant KO.
I just force my way through it, you know?
Right. So, like, I don't know. It's kind of interesting that, like, Lost Box, because obviously Yveltal goes into Lugia, but Lost Box being like, I can do one better with Rayquaza and still get around Big Parasols. But yeah, you also have the amazing rare Raikou in this deck, which will do that spread damage, which Jake talked about earlier. And then just Raikou V, if you just need a single attacker to knock out your Lugia Vs, you know, and V-Stars.
I mean, and really just anything in the format, because a lot of decks right now are benching, and they're benching a lot of Pokemon. So being able to, you know, use Raikou V, and whether that's, you know, Squishy Mon, I'm sure it's primarily used for Lugia V, right? If you both have full benches, Raikou V probably knocks out through weakness, I would assume, right? I mean, because it's 20 base plus 20 more for each bench Pokemon, you and your opponents. That's 5 and 5, 100, 200.
You're gonna get
220.
most
Yeah, you're gonna get most. You're gonna get most of those, and that's, I mean, wait, 220, and then weakness, like 400 damage max.
I mean,
so
yeah, sure.
so you're knocking out a bunch of Lugias.
Yeah, I look. This is a really cool deck. I think you have an energy recycler as well, because, you know, a lot of this discard energy. So I don't know. In terms of like Lost Box was a deck that I had built before, Jake, and I think this is a great one because I think I still have most of these cards. It doesn't really. I don't think there's really anything from the new set Silver Tempest that's even in this deck.
I don't think so either.
So, like, yeah, if you're, you know, rocking with some older sets, or you were out the game for a couple of months, like, this is a great deck to pick up, in my opinion.
If you also maybe want to do a binder drop of cards, you can look at the Arceus deck that placed, I think this was 5th overall. This is a binder drop, Sean. You have your Arceus V and V-Star. You have your Aerodactyl V-Star, which you had mentioned earlier. It's paired up with a couple different Pokemon. Flying Pikachu VMAX. I think we may have mentioned that previously, you know, Azul Garcia Griego. won, I think it was North American internationals with Flying Pikachu VMAX Arceus V-Star. So very powerful combination still. Espeon VMAX, which I think we've talked about in a previous week, the Espeon VMAX, just using a bunch of damage through Max Mindstorm, and then also the ability, preventing effects of Pokemon that have, or preventing effects from, Pokemon that have energy attached to them. You also have in here three attacking Pokemon, I guess, because Luminion V has been seeing a lot of attacks as of late through like Lugia V-Star. You've got Empoleon V, Sean.
Yeah.
Empoleon V basically stopping all basic Pokemon in play that have abilities unless they have a rule box. So your Comphase, anything Reggie. This is the quote-unquote Reggie killer.
I mean,
Emperor
Archeops.
Eyes. Archeops. Well, no, Archeops is not a basic Pokemon.
Oh,
though.
you're right. You're right. I'm wildin'.
It's okay. I wish it did, because then, Archeops would tank further. But anyways, also having the Drapion V in there, Drapion V.
Yep.
Built to hit
Mew
Mew VMAX, and that's pretty much it.
Yep.
Also in here is the Yveltal, Cry of Destruction Yveltal. So we've been talking a lot about the Amazing Rare Yveltal. This is different. This is from the Pokemon Go set. You may remember it in any Sander Watchik deck that is Control, Cry of Destruction, 2 colorless energies in the cost. Discard up to 3 special energies from your opponent's Pokemon. A lot of things are playing special energies right now, so you can take out a lot of energies from the field. Discard a lot to have your opponent pretty much have no energies left in the game.
Mm-hmm. Especially I think with the Drapion, your Mew matchup is probably decent, but Mew VMAX definitely can suffer if you're playing against somebody who's being too aggressive with, hey, I have an energy attachment every turn. I'll just go ahead and attach. 3 turns in or whatever. All of a sudden, if there's 3 double turbos down, and you get rid of all 3 of them, well, they only have one attacker left in the game. That's not great. Mm-hmm. So,
what's very interesting, in my opinion, Sean, about this deck is the 2 Hyper Potions.
Oh, weird.
You're playing Hyper Potions, and you're playing VMAX Pokemon, so very hard to one-shot unless you're hitting for, like for the Espeon Dark weakness or for the Flying Pikachu V Lightning weakness. And so using the Hyper Potion to negate some of that energy to maybe force your opponent to do a 3-shot on you, or in terms of the Lost Box math, right, negating those that damage counter placement, that critical damage counter placement that the opponent is putting all over the board.
Yeah, that isn't. It'd be interesting to see how much he used those Hyper Potions throughout the tournament. Because 2 of them, it's semi-significant. It's not like a one of or something where it's like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you're arguably playing one like every other game, right?
Yeah,
at least. So kind of cool deck. I mean, using the research and it has 1 Sharon's Care in there too.
Always love a good Sharon's Care in an Arceus deck.
Always love the good Sharon's Care. I don't think the Regigigas deck is that different. I mean, this one specifically playing Trekking Shoes, you opted for multiple copies of each Regi, so not limiting yourself to just one. 4 Path to the Peak, because stopping your opponent's Pokemon V abilities is really, really good. Or, well, I guess I should say rule box abilities, because like Radiant Greninja and stuff shuts off. I will say as well, the Lost Box deck that Pablo Mesa played, they do have the 2 Raikou, 2 Rayquaza as well. No Raikou V. No Raikou V, but the Amazing Rares. I love how much play the Amazing Rares are getting.
Yeah, it is actually pretty cool. Like if you look at the main quote unquote main Pokemon in this deck, you have like the Lost Zone effects around Comfey, Sableye, and Cramorant. And then you have the Amazing Rare sort of effect around Raikou and Rayquaza. And it's just cool, like all this stuff coming out of the borders of the card. And just sort of seeing that all on display and in a deck list. It's kind of fun.
And it's just really cool because, like, especially for the Amazing Rares, right? For Vivid Voltage, when they were coming out, everybody wrote them off.
Well, because their energy requirements are just so weird.
It's so absurd. But now with something like Mirage Gate, opening up the meta in the Lost Box or Lost Zone engine,
Yeah.
right? Colress Experiment, really good card. Comfey, really good card. Constantly putting things in the Lost Zone. You even have other things, not in this list specifically, but like Lost Vacuum, putting things in the Lost Zone.
Yeah.
It's just,
I was gonna say I'll be interested to see, because the Amazing Rares all are gonna rotate in March, which is a little sad. I just looked it up. I was like, what's the regulation mark? And it's D, which is sad.
Yeah, they've just had a short lifespan.
But I will be interested to see, as Pokemon continues to print Dragon cards more and more, which the change that they've made, not the change, but like the thing about Dragon Pokemon that is more unique is that they typically take more than one type of energy. And that has always been their downside in the past, right? Is that like, oh, how do you get the energy onto them, etc. But, outside of Giratina V-Star, it'll be interesting to see if other Dragon types in the future also rely on the Lost Box engine. Yeah, I don't know. Just a thought.
It's also interesting. I sent you a image of it, Sean. Dialga, 28th overall in the San Diego Championships, was Dialga V-Star. I mean, I talked about it earlier, just being a cool deck. Here it is right there, playing the Zacian V as usual, because Zacian V is just real good, right? As we've talked about previously. It's been a while, but we did it. In there, the Mysterious Tail Mew, just really getting you going and stuff like that. You've got your trekking shoes as well. Again, turbo, things like that. Your supporters, not a lot of supporters, to be honest, which I think is very interesting. But then again, with your Mew, right? Your Mew is basically like a supporter in grabbing the trekking shoes
and the metal
stuff.
saucers.
Your Ultra Balls, yeah, your metal saucers. So it would make sense why you basically just want a ton of items. Instead of, opting for more supporters. And although I don't have a list in there, because we were talking about Amazing Rares, I saw this on Twitter, made day 2. Zacian V, or I'm sorry, not Zacian V. Well, Zacian V is in this deck. Zacian Amazing Rare made a day 2 appearance, going 8-0-1 in day 1. Didn't make top 8, obviously, and I don't know the final placements of the deck. It's being called Lost Dogs, utilizing Zacian V, Zacian Amazing Rare, Comfey, right? Because Lost Box engine, very good, and can, as we talked about, can really help fill the energy requirements of those crazy Amazing Rares. But also the other Zacian V, the one from the Pokemon Go set that accelerated, the psychic energy. So, I mean, although the format is very interesting, and by interesting, I mean a lot of people are tired of it because Lugia just really dominates. There's still some extra stuff that, can pop up here and there that you can innovate and have fun with.
Yeah, and we'll see what Crown Zenith, how if that really shakes up the format too much. I think Eternatus, as we said, rated Eternatus has potential, and then the Zacian V-Star and the Zamazenta V-Star, probably more the Zacian, but like, I don't know. Like, who knows, man? Like, if you're gonna play the dogs, now's the time before they rotate.
I know. So. And we talked about the energy requirement for Zacian, how it's like not actually that out. It's like not that crazy, and you do a lot of damage.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you can do enough to one-hit KO something, and then you're big enough to not necessarily be one-hit KO'd back, it is interesting, because it's like, oh, you can really swing that prize race pretty quick. So
it'll be curious to see where the meta goes, and we'll keep you informed here on the Metapod podcast as always. And Sean, do we have anything else to talk about?
No. Well, one thing I'll say is
Sean's like, I want to go to bed.
Well, no. Like, there's the next regional isn't until the beginning of February, so it'll be a bit. And the next time we see a big regional online will be Crown Zenith Legal. So we'll see if any of these predictions, Jake, are held up.
We'll start talking about Crown Zenith and the online meta. So people will be really excited about that this week, and those will start popping up. So we'll kind of see out of the gates if anything really changes. But we'll keep you informed, as always, as the podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I'm Jake, that's Sean, and have a great rest of the week.